Hi, it's July 16th, 2024. You've joined the Kubeflow community call. Do want to remind everyone that this call is being recorded and is governed by the Kubeflow Code of Conduct. I would like to start off with the agenda today, which I believe we're going to get an update on Notebooks 2.0 from Matthew. Matthew, what's up?
Hello. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we've been working a lot on Notebooks 2.0. We is the Notebooks working group, which includes a number of new people from both Red Hat and other people. I am not from Red Hat, if you haven't seen me before. Hi. I am independent. I also make deploycative, but that's not relevant. Okay. So the things that are happening in Notebooks 2.0 are that there's a new version coming, which means a new controller, a new UI, and a new backend API. But the specific changes you can review the proposal. But the general overview is that rather than from an end user perspective, the rather than having to directly work with the pods spec, you as an admin of the cluster define kind of templates, and then those templates get chosen by the users. So it's kind of more like when you go on a cloud vendor and pick a particular instance type, for example, and similarly, then you also pick a image type, which is kind of more like the stuff that's installed. Anyway, so that's the actual that's the reason for it, among other things, including the 2.1, which is not straight away, but it will support or some similar version will support spawning VMs as well as just pods on a Kubernetes cluster. But that's a bit further down the line. So the progress update I just wanted to share so that we could have other people potentially join in and help out if you're because some people don't want to participate at the very beginning of a project. But now that we've kind of progressed a bit, it might be easier to contribute. So there are three components, one of which is a React-based front end, one of which is a Go-based REST API used by the front end, which we're calling the back end for the front end. Um, there is also the controller, which is written in KubeBuilder and Go, obviously, and the controller is the CRD thing, the thing that controls the workspace CRD and the workspace kind CRD. So the controller is almost finished, which means that the rest of the components can be worked on now. There is a small number of tasks remaining in the controller, which is finishing the validation webhook and other things, but we have people to contribute that. Unless you particularly, if someone in the meeting really wants to work on the controller with us, we would appreciate it, of course. The best way to find out more about what you can do is to join us at 8 a.m. Pacific on Thursday at the Notebooks meeting. Or potentially if you have specific Go experience and or React experience and want to contribute to Notebooks because you maybe use it, especially if you use it, in fact, 1.0, I would love to hear from you. So reach out to me on Slack, on the CNCF Slack, Matthew Wicks, or in the Kubeflow Notebooks channel. That'd be great. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take a few.
Will notebooks be an option to deploy by itself?
That's a really good question. So the first version, definitely not. The subsequent versions, it will be a lot easier to make that change, but it still will, it's still the problem. So as of lately, at least the website talks about a thing called Kubeflow Platform. The key difference between Kubeflow Platform and the standalone components is the presence of authentication. And notebooks don't make a lot of sense without authentication and profiles, like user isolation, if you know what I mean, like this kind of concept. So at least initially, I can't see any real world use case for notebooks with no authentication. Um, so that would mean we would have to effectively make some kind of authentication system that is not Kubeflow platform, which obviously we could do, but it does start raising some questions about what it means to be part of Kubeflow again. You know what I mean? But the because currently, while we do have standalone components, Kubeflow Notebooks is and pipelines also kind of fits into this category as well, but it still supports the standalone mode with no authentication. But like, it does raise some questions. So my answer is, if there is, so I guess there's two possibilities. The first is that for some reason people do want it with no authentication, in which case I guess we could talk about that. And then the second possibility is that someone um, is able to and willing to contribute, and we can see a pathway that makes sense to create our own authentication system in notebooks. That's that is optionally there if you're not using a platform. But
Yeah,
that's my answer.
I'm not saying that we need that. I'm just asking whether that was in the headlight. Sounds like it's a stretch at best.
Yeah, it's
And
definitely not going to be in one. It's not going to be in 2.0, if you know what I mean. It could be in a future version.
all right, no, that's wonderful. Thanks for that update. Is there any I know you've worked a lot on the images. I think that a lot of our CVEs come from notebooks or
Okay,
notebook images.
so
Is there
yeah.
some philosophy here about mitigation or something like that that comes in 2.0, or is it just, hey, that's notebook images and that's completely separate?
Okay, so that's a good point. I didn't talk about the images at all. So one of the key changes in Notebooks 2.0 is it is much, much, much easier to bring your own images. We still in 2.0 there will not be any um, additional image building capacity. What I mean by that is you still have to build your own images or use the images we provide, but there are discussions, and we're still trying to figure out the best way to do it to handle automatic building of images, or at least mutations of images. So, you start from maybe a base and then you have some kind of pre-installed pip package thing, that kind of concept. But but that's not in the first release. So to answer your question specifically, we have done some updates to images in 1.9. 1.9 images will be the first images that will work with 2.0. But the point is that the old images can still be used with 2.0. In fact, technically you can use older versions as well. You just have to disable some security features. The reason the security features you have to disable are again, because, okay, I'll explain one thing for everyone. There's two new resources, CRDs, kind, workspace kind, and workspace. Workspace kind, think of it like you define a group of options for your users. So Jupyter Lab with TensorFlow, or VS Code with like Golang pre-installed or something like that. And that's your kind. And a kind comes up in the UI when the user is spawning it it has a picture, it has a description, and then it has primarily two things that we call options. The first one, when you're talking about the current first kind of workspace, which is the pod template. So you have a pod config and an image config. So the image config is the one that we're talking about here, which is the combination of a Docker image and a little bit of information about it so that the controller knows about it. And so initially, you'll be able to just put in the Kubeflow 1.9 images, and we're not planning to ship 2.0 specific images during the alpha because it would just be confusing. But you are correct, Josh, that so I'll explain one thing, but you asked about CVEs. So the CVE concept is a little bit problematic in notebook images because obviously people don't want, like, breaking changes to packages that people are using could cause them problems. Of course, you're free to rebuild the images yourself with any versions of anything you like, but I will warn you, it does take many, many hours of work to get a stable image usually. But yes, but the one thing we did change in 1.9, the reason I said about security features is that you can now run Kubeflow notebook images with with no privilege escalation, dropped capabilities, and run as not root. You can obviously run it as not root to begin with, but the run as not root flag, I think, did break some things before.
All right. So one of the philosophies that we've had in the community is that we do want to graduate from the CNCF, become a graduated project, and there are security requirements as we work through that. And, I was hoping that in the next two releases after 1.9, we would be really close to finishing up everything that's needed to graduate from the CNCF, all the check boxes. And I think some of the issues we've had are around security, around CVEs, around other stuff. So I'm not saying we have to solve that now. I'm just giving you that heads up, as you think about coming back and communicating to the community about what we're doing in 2.0 is one of the check marks you may want to think about is how are we getting closer to graduation requirements. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to know the specific requirements regarding images because, like, there are a lot of images both in notebooks and in the whole Kubeflow, and CVEs, as we've seen recently, are being weaponized as like kind of tools to disrupt open source projects. So like, there is some concerns there, obviously, about the legitimacy of a lot of CVEs. So it's it is something that like we do have like the question is what is the metric by which they're doing it? If it's a rational metric, which is like, are you responding appropriately to legitimate concerns of security? Absolutely, we're going to be working on how we can improve that. If the question is, are you trying to get the CVE number to 0? No, we're not. Right? That's not possible.
Yeah, and so I think that we just need to state a policy, live by a policy, do our best to move towards it, even if it's quarantining some and only trying to perfect or improve a few. There
Like
might
making it visible, right? Like I think for a lot of people, the requirement is based off the user, right? If you're talking about a Department of Defense, computer system, maybe they care more about it, right? And they want to manually review every CVE that's known. So maybe we need to just publish again the software bill of materials, things like that, right? And whereas for a normal end user, it may not matter at all, right?
All right, one last question. I know we spent a lot of time on this, but the model registry has made great strides. That team is very energetic. Is there any 2.0 integration with the model registry, any workflow, anything like that?
So the core overlap is with the developers that are working on both projects. So there are people who are working on both projects. So as a result, there is some connection, mostly in the way that the UIs are designed. There is some debate around whether the UIs should be using a Red Hat based templating engine, and that's still obviously a bit in the air. But in the end, it is a React based app. And again, the majority of the actual complexity is not in the UI section, it's in the controller and the backend API. So if we end up even if we're trying to get an MVP out there so that people can try the new notebooks. So what I'm saying is, you asked about model registry. Other than having stuff pre-installed in our images, there isn't anything specific, but they will feel very similar. That's kind of what I was trying to get at.
All right,
Like
good.
the look. Yeah.
All right, thanks for that update. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, great. Hey, a lot of times people will not walk towards kind of issues or try to avoid them. That's fine. We had a little bit of a dust up on Ricardo on a PR, and then he asked to be taken off as an approver, I believe it is. All I want to do is make sure that people understand that in writing, sometimes things come across a little harsh or whatever, and we all do it. I'm not condoning it or saying that anything but if we continue to escalate on both sides, I'm not sure that is always the best way to do it. I would rather just get together and say, hey, we both maybe shot from the hip a little bit, and let's hug it out, and we all have best interests in the community. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I would like to identify that let's try to play nice, right?
Hey, Josh, sorry for the interruption, but thank you for bringing this up. But I think this is worth another discussion, like separately, rather than the community meeting. I believe this is like a personal issue. Yeah. yeah, we can continue discussing that in the committee meeting too this week, if you want.
Yeah,
My-
yeah.
my-
I just want folks to know that obviously this is something that everybody needs to understand. We're all volunteers. All right, let's keep moving forward. New meeting format. So a while back, we had folks talking that we're going to have some new blood come in and revamp this meeting and get things going. I saw Francisco here. Maybe there's an update on folks that want to change this meeting up or have. But is there anybody here that wants to talk about taking leadership position and kind of moving this meeting in a different format?
I commented on that GitHub issue, I believe it was, and I'm happy to volunteer and be a part of facilitating the meeting. But I wasn't necessarily commenting on changing the meeting. That I'm, to be honest, I'm mostly ambivalent about. I don't think I've attended a number of these meetings, but not a sufficient quantity that I feel like I can really speculate on what's better. So, my 2 cents.
Do we have a specific proposal here, Josh, or what's actually?
Well, look, I'm quite aware that you need to change things up from time to time, and I think that bringing in new perspectives and new voices and gives people a chance to shine, that gives them a chance for leadership, gives them responsibility. That whole thing, I'm glad to have folks come in and bring this community to a new level. And so, I think there's my experience here was that when we moved to an every week format, for me personally, is just too much. I wasn't preparing for the meetings well enough. You can see I do the agenda right as we get going. And it's just, I think that having, others come in and kind of bring their philosophies and strategies and just the way that they solve problems to, or keep the meeting going would be good. So anyway, Francisco, when you're ready, I think you're the one that's raised your hand. Please let me know when you're ready to take the reins on this, and we'll get you going. And you should probably have access into the 1Password vault, and that's another thing that we need to talk about as well. But anyway, I just want to bring that up. We did have a conversation with the Kubeflow Steering Committee and with the CNCF. And one of the major topics there was, we're coming out with 1.9. We want to use the CNCF to amplify our messaging. There were a lot of ideas. I was kept trying to drive this down to maybe 2 or 3 things, but you guys know me. I always have 15 topics to go after. And George Castro, who was been very helpful to the community, brought up a lot of good ideas. We probably came out with a list of, I don't know, 8 things to do to help perhaps grow the community going forward. I think some of them are around a KubeCon, a lot of focus around events and things that we can do around KubeCon, but there were a few, like perhaps the CNCF can help us with webinars. And so I do believe that having a CNCF sponsored webinar on a few topics coming up, even if we would do one once a quarter, we have so many working groups, we have so many new working groups, we have so much new stuff coming out, very complex topics. I think it potentially we should submit potentially some talks and see if we can get into some of these CNCF resources, including the webinar. So I just give that as a heads up, and as those things start to come together, it would be a flyby right now, but more defined. Hey, what's the next step? Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time before 1.9 comes out. Doesn't mean that we can't amplify 1.9 after it comes out with the CNCF. It's just that I don't know that we're going to be enough time to be coordinated with the CNCF, and probably we should have jumped on that a bit earlier. If we look at the release timeline, maybe we should have this, hey, let's go alert the CNCF, that we've got a release coming, and we're really truly going to make that time frame. Okay. Batched and cached predictions. I like this one, Francisco. What's up with this?
Yeah, so this is a topic that I've been discussing heavily with the Feast community. We've had some a whole bunch of talks about, and I wanted to raise this with folks here. So it's a use case that I don't believe, at least to my understanding, Kubeflow has quite a bit of documentation about at the moment. It's a pretty simple concept, right? Pre-compute predictions for a set of data, and you want to store them online somewhere and serve them. Now, some of you may or may not know, I'm a maintainer for Feast, the feature store. Now, our general recommendation probably to put that in a feature store. That's what I've done in the past at several different companies. It works pretty well. Now, that said, there are some trade-offs in how you can architect that. There's some stuff that exists today, but I really just want to bring this to the community here and have a discussion about it before we went and built things around that and kind of figure out what folks think about it and just get some eyes on it. That's the simplest case, is kind of the batch predictions, which is effectively a feature when you think hard about it. The other case is caching predictions, which is slightly different architecture than most folks typically do, and it has to do with flipping things, of updating the using essentially a caching mechanism after computing a score when data producers change the underlying data, rather than on demand at runtime calling, hey, do my model inference. This is very, very typical for like tabular data modeling, where this works pretty well. Now, there's more details in the document, and I link to some other resources that give some useful content on as well. So really, I just wanted to get folks to facilitate a discussion, because I think this is an important use case for a lot of companies, and I don't think it's something that the community has content around yet, but I think it's a good opportunity where we could probably add a lot of value here.
Can you clarify if you're asking something about Kubeflow or Kserve, or what would the action of the community be?
The action of the community would be to read the issue, and if you had feedback on the proposal, and like we haven't drafted an RFC yet, but if people want to collaborate, please feel free to comment on the issue and get some eyes on it.
Can you give like a very brief summary, just so that we all know exactly what you're proposing, if you have a proposal, that is?
Yeah. So I do. I mean, so the idea is that if you want to you batch score some data using probably Kubeflow pipelines, put it in a CSV or a Parquet file or a big one, right? And then you would upload it to a feature store like Feast, and you would serve it. And you would make a client call to Feast. Now, you could, depending on how you want to do that, because it's a little bit of an oddity calling a prediction from a feature store, you could have a call to Kserve that then makes a call to Feast. And in the transformer architecture that's outlined in the Kubeflow documentation, it would basically be that, except for this specific model, you'd have to have some logic in your orchestration to say, like, hey, look, we know this is a pre-computed prediction. Now, the other way is you could just call Feast directly. And if you notice that in the transformer case, it calls Feast first anyways, but before it actually does the model inference. And so there's a broader architectural question, well, like, oh, maybe we could just, as a general structure, pre-compute and persist things in Feast. And so that way, as the operating model, like, for example, with Feast, when data producers change, you can push changes to the feature store. You could then extend a call from Feast to make inference and cache the score. So when a client says, hey, give me the score, it can have a pre-computed cache score. Now, this is a little bit more complicated, and it tends to lend itself really to be most effective when latency is a big constraint. Now, at previous places where I worked at, where we had to support like underwriting a checkout for Amazon, for example, this was a really high value add thing. But it's a little bit probably it may or may not be typical for some people. Now, it's very, very typical for pretty much all of fintech. That's where I spent a lot of my career, is banking and finance and technology. But you know, again, it's a little bit of a
So I just want to clarify. It sounds to me like you're proposing something for Feast. This is the Kubeflow call. Are you asking for like collaboration, or are you asking for just feedback on a Feast proposal?
So I'm proposing for both, right? On the Feast front, yes, but I am also asking for like review explicitly from the K-serve community, because I think that if we're comfortable with this approach, then it would probably make sense to actually document that within Kubeflow and K-serve on like, hey, here's a way on how you can do this, and to give the community some guidelines on this. Because again, this batch, these batch models, I was surprised that we don't have any kind of documentation on this, when I think 90% of the models that I've supported in for production use cases have been that.
I agree. There is kind of a documentation lack on batch. I assume you're talking about on the Kserve website, or do you mean on the Kubeflow website?
On the Kserve website, or I mean both in this particular site, just for this particular example of like, hey, I want to serve a batch model, what should I do?
That is, I mean, yeah, it's kind of an unsolved problem in Kubeflow. I mean, it's not unsolved in the sense people have done it, but it's like there's no pattern.
Right, and so my view is we could probably collaborate together with the folks here to say like, what is the Kubeflow approved way to do it, or recommended rather.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's an interesting idea. I mean, I think it would vary for each people, so it's hard to do. Anyway, maybe it starts as a blog post then or something. I don't know. But
yeah, whatever avenue that fosters the most collaboration from folks, if folks are interested in this, is basically. Otherwise, I'm happy to write it myself, and I have a PR and Feast that kind of shows how you could do it trivial with Feast. But again, that's very much Feast centric. I think broadly, speaking more broadly for Kserve, like, hey, how does this work together with this? That's something that I think is more useful for the community.
Okay, I think this is a good discussion. I appreciate the heads up, and if folks can look at that and perhaps comment on it and provide guidance, support, that would be great. Anything else, Francisco?
No, that's all. Any feedback on that topic? If people, take a look, thumbs up, thumbs down, or a comment, would love it. Thank you.
Okay, we've got this checking broken links in website during CI.
I love this idea. This is a really good idea. I'm sure there's a lot of ones to fix though.
Yeah, I mentioned that in a meeting, in a past meeting, and I sent a PR to enable Netlify plugin. So I think it's ready to be merged. Your feedback will be appreciated. To get started with that, the existing broken links were added to a whitelist, so we can work on them later. And when broken links exist in a PR, the Netlify build will be blocked, so we can look on its logs and identify the broken links.
It's an interesting way of doing it. Yeah, okay. I mean, we could also just add, oh wait, no, can we add another check that just allows the build but doesn't, we have like a redirect rule test?
No, as far as I know, the plugin doesn't work with redirects.
No, sorry, wrong word. I mean, like, is it possible to have it still support allow the build, but just have a warning or error?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check this.
I'm just looking at our GitHub act because I don't, yeah, because I think because I'm pretty sure the way Netlify is set up is not with a GitHub action. You know what I mean? So we can't actually. It would probably be in the Netlify settings, right, to add another check if that's even possible. But yeah, I mean, I'm very supportive of the idea because it's so easy for the links to get dead over time. So yeah, the only people who can approve it are root approvers, I believe. Do you know that this definitely works, this config?
Yeah, in the PR, I put screencast.
Oh, sorry. Go back.
You can see that in action. In the description.
I'm just looking at this. Is this Netlify plugin thingy? Who made it? Is it
There's a link in the description of the PR. There's a link for the plugin.
Yeah, as I'm saying, like it's built in. Okay, yeah, okay. Is it built in? Okay. It's like what I'm saying is this was made by a random person. That's all. It looks like it might be made by a random person, which is why I'm just a little bit always concerned about anything like that.
Yeah, it's not a native Netlify. It's made for by a random person, exactly.
It also the change it looks like it hasn't had it. I mean, it maybe doesn't need many changes. I'm just like there is obviously supply chain risks with using random plugins. I wonder if there's like an alternative that's used that supports Doxy or Hugo directly. I mean, I'm not saying it's also that would allow us to do it in a GitHub action as well and still allow the build to succeed. Because sometimes even if a link isn't working, we might want to merge a PR, you know what I mean? But I'm just obviously we can still merge the PR, we just wouldn't be able to preview it. But
yeah, we have a to-do list, so we can merge the PR with broken links. That's what I did for the existing broken links. I didn't fix any broken links so far. Just enabled the plugin and added the broken links to this to-do list.
Okay, anyway, I'll respond on some comments. Good, thank you.
No
I will
problem.
make sure that it gets merged. I don't have the ability to merge it, but Josh or James will probably merge it if I ping them, so it'll be good.
I mentioned that in a past meeting, and Josh and Andre were supported to that.
Yeah. And so my only kind of serious concern, as always, is introducing any dependency on the website to anything that isn't either hard pinned on a version. Is there a way to hard pin a plugin version? You know?
Sorry, didn't understand.
What I mean by that is like, so right now there's no version specified, right? So like right now, if the developer of that plugin decides to inject some malicious code, they would be able to do so, right? And
yeah,
so like
probably.
is there a way to specify a specific version or pin it to prevent any other version being used?
I don't know that. That's something that
I'll check. Yeah. Because if that is the case, then I'm happy with it. If that's not the case, then we need to use a different approach. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
supply chain attacks are a serious problem at the moment. Anyway, that's fine, Josh. I'll work with him to make sure we get that because I want that merged just as much as he does.
Yeah, broken links are a pain in the anyway. Okay, Ricardo.
Hey Josh, I'm here.
All right. Do you have time to give us an update on 1.9?
Yeah, sure. So for the 1.9 update, I believe we have a better topic in the top of the meeting notes, Josh. You don't need to add another one.
Oh,
Yeah,
up here.
there you go. Okay, so just a reminder, we are a week left for the release date for final release of 1.9. I'm very excited to see this new release. There's a lot of good stuff to bring into the general Kubeflow community. As for now, our to-do items are waiting for the other distributions to ACK their tests if it looks good with RC2. We got good feedback from some of them, but there are still some others pending testing. There is one last plan doc issue we would like to merge. Then after that, I'll work on making it available for the 1.9 release. This is part of the work that we need to do for July 22nd after we got the final release of Kubeflow cut. As for the other working groups, I believe we have all of them except one that needs to cut the final release. I'll be waiting for them. And then I believe we are good to sync all the manifests. And when we have this and having some other ACKs for distribution, I believe we're good to release Kubeflow 1.9. I think that's it for now. We're preparing also the blog post, and the PR is already there. And Stefan is working on the final reviews on the PR to have the blog post. The slide deck is also almost there. It's 90% done. All I need is to update the roadmap, the release notes for each working group and components. And then I believe we're good to go with final release. With that being said, is there any questions, comments on the 1.9 release updates?
So like I can cut the release for Kubeflow notebooks and the rest of Kubeflow core platform stuff whenever, but there's my only hesitancy with doing it is that the only people who have tested it right now are the people who are pulling directly from the v1.9 branch on the manifest repo. The current version,
No,
because there was
actually Nutanix did for master.
Okay, yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Yeah, so like right now the 1.9.0 RC2 didn't include, or whatever the latest one was, didn't, I think it was 2, didn't include there was only a small number of changes, but there was one big change in the notebook images, like as I was saying, to support the rootless dropped permissions running, which Julius and I and a bunch of other people did some testing, but because it does change the UID, the GID that the notebook runs as, it will cause problems if people don't use, it's pretty technical, but like have an FS group. It only affects OpenShift as far as I know, because they don't use the FS group on the volumes, but they use their own images anyway, so it shouldn't be a problem. It's just like yeah.
So my 2
we
cents
also,
on
yeah.
that. If it involves something that's related to rootless containers, let's not put so much pressure on this because there's still an open GSOC project that deals with rootless containers. Let's do what we can do for 1.9 because July 22nd is next Monday. And
Oh no, what I'm saying is
then
everything's written. No, I think you're misunderstanding. All I'm saying is that that change already went in. It's just because it didn't get pulled into the last release candidate, it wouldn't have been tested properly.
so we're good. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the
Like,
update.
have you heard any other issues? Like, so what I'm saying is I can cut it right now, but it just means that we have to cut a 191 if something is wrong, you know?
No, this is totally fine. It's always there's always a plan to have a patch release, whatever is the issue we need to update from the components. So yeah, don't worry about it. I know that we probably need some patch release, but let's focus on the 190 for now.
So if anyone, I'll cut that release after this meeting. If anyone wants to raise any concerns they have about the notebooks components, which include dashboard, profiles, KFAM, obviously notebooks, tensor boards, volumes, web app, has anyone got any problems that they've run into with the last release candidate that they want to raise before we cut it now? If not, then if you do, please message me. I'll wait like a bit after this meeting, and then if I don't hear anything, I'll cut it. Cool. Feel free to message me on the Slack if you have a problem.
Yeah, Matthew, when you have cut the final release, please let me know. Then I can sync the manifest. we'll probably need to finish all the sync up when Judas go back, which is the final release date. But if we have the PR open for the syncing manifest for Kubeflow, it would be great because it takes less time to work on the release.
So what I'm saying is, do you want me to wait a day or two then? When is he getting back?
Look, up to you. But if we need to have the PR to syncing the Kubeflow manifest for July 22nd. Okay. I'll leave that judgment to you, but make sure that we have at least the release cut by end of this week. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm just wondering if it gives someone more. Is anyone actively testing the release -1.9 branch? Is what I'm wondering.
Probably
It's just good.
Daniela from Canonical. I need to check with her if she have any updates because she was asking a lot of questions, but I don't believe there's anything about the Kubeflow components. It's just about the training operator. And with training operator already cutting their final release, I believe all the issues or concerns she had was already fixed or solved.
Cool.
So yeah, I didn't heard anything from the distributions about anything about potential bugs on Kubeflow components.
Cool.
Alrighty. Any other questions or comments? Awesome. Back to you, Josh. If you don't have any questions or comments, of course.
Yeah, I mean, look, this has been a tremendous job to get this. There's so much work that went into 1.9. The trying to keep the blog post, which I think the blog post now is in a PR, and the slide deck in sync can be challenging. And I think that do we have a date for the PowerPoint presentation recording assigned yet?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're out of time to get this done for July 22nd. I didn't receive any feedback from the working group leads on the video recording, so I'll probably need to work after the release date and see if we don't waste much time on recording this video and publish on the social media.
Well,
Unfortunately, it is what it is.
We have most of them here, right? I mean, we have Johnny, we have Andre and Matthew, you. Could we set up a call for Thursday and try to do a recording? I mean, it's easier. I know that you were trying to get everybody to do the separate recording. I found that to be there was a lot of production effort there. If you can do it in like just one shot and record it, sometimes it's a little easier, and often it's gone off pretty well. So, I mean, my advice would be that if we can't do it this week for whatever reason, try to find a date next week. I would almost try to do it twice, but you really only takes about an hour if you get everybody lined up. And you know, this is I think a valuable expression, education effort for the community, but it doesn't have to be done with the release. It doesn't have to be done by the 22nd, but I think it probably helps because it helps people to write the blog post better as well as to understand from the experts. So anyway, that's just my advice.
Yeah.
Is there a chance we could do it on Thursday or Friday?
Yeah, I really appreciate your feedback, Josh. Unfortunately, because we have the pipelines working group lead all this week, and same for platform working group. So Julius and Tim are out for this week until July 22nd. Unfortunately, this can not be done for this week. I'll see if I can set up a meeting next week, and if we can make it everyone together, I'll ask for the ones who could not attend to just record a video. And well, Mateo is here in the meeting. He told me that he has some skills with video editing, so he can help me on merging other recordings if needed for the people who will be absent.
I have an idea, and may not work, but something to think about. Most people come to this meeting. You could just do it in this time slot next week.
I'm always a little bit concerned about not just like the production value. While it is makes it, I still think there's two problems. First is that I think we're unlikely to find a time when everyone's available, so we're always going to have at least one person who needs to record it outside of it. And then there's the other problem, which is that, you know, if we really limit everyone to 2 minutes, we say you've got 2 minutes, make a video that explains your thing. It prevents the video becoming crazy. You know what I mean? It's like, and then like I remember last time we re-recorded various ones because they were too long or things like that, right? So I don't know. If it's more like maybe if we assume from the very beginning that it's going to be the 6 working groups or whatever, 2 minutes each.
Yeah, I
Also,
get
I
it.
want to do a demo in mine, right?
I found that we could, you know, we've probably done this 10, 15 times. It's actually, I mean, there is some post-production work that can be done, but often we get pretty close almost the first time through. I mean, we can get 90% of the way there.
Because like from a user perspective, I want to show, I think definitely part of the video should be showing the new changes to the UI. They're a little bit changes. They're not big, but they're like any UI changes, which are pretty rare in Kubeflow, I think should probably be shown, you know, in a demo almost. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that becomes another, I think that's a great suggestion. I would love to see that. I don't know that we have enough, like we didn't set up to do that. We just did the PowerPoint thing, but I like what you're saying. I just wonder if that pushes us back, and that's okay. I would almost think that if we could do like a simple one with the PowerPoint and then a more hands-on one later, more is better in some ways. But the other piece is I don't want people to have to spend hours and hours getting ready for this. You know, like, oh, I got to set up a cluster. I got to have this. I got to have that. And then when you go to use it, it doesn't work.
I mean, most people won't need to do that. Well, I think most working groups can easily just talk about their changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think that at some point in the video, we should show the slight cleanups that have happened in the UI because I think they are good for people. But
Yeah. I'm completely agree with that. I think showing people the UI is much better than talking to it. So, yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, I'll leave that to you, Ricardo. You know, you've heard my feedback, whatever. You do it the way you want to. You're the release manager. All hail the release manager. Fantastic job, Ricardo. Really appreciate everything.
Thanks, Josh. Much appreciated.
All right, you've got the con. All right, anybody else? Any other topics that anybody wants to bring up?
I mean, there's one, but it's about like the future of the Kubeflow repo. Obviously, we now have 2 new repos, Kubeflow/notebooks and Kubeflow/dashboard. We haven't actually done anything with the dashboard repo yet because it was only just created. But there is a lot of debate around, you know, disabling issue creation on Kubeflow/Kubeflow. And I just think we should quickly just discuss what that means because what like it will cause confusion. You know what I mean? And so like there is some discussion about it on an issue, but it's just I want has anyone got any particular thoughts about that? Like, so the idea is that we have Kubeflow, no issues allowed on it. Obviously, there are thousands of issues already, but we try and move the existing issues. We block new issue creation, and we point users when they click new issue to go to the various other repos in the org. So, pipelines for, they say, is this issue related to pipelines? And it says, go to this repo. Is the issue related to notebooks? Go to this repo. You know what I mean? My only concern there is that not having a place for just random questions about Kubeflow overall, that means they'll probably end up on the community repo. And I don't know, like, I quite like to be able to follow the community repo directly so that I see every change on, like, every issue on there. And it might remove some ability to have kind of a secret place for the community to just not be in the middle of this onslaught of questions. That's kind of what I'm saying. But I understand the reasoning, and I don't want to. The Kubeflow repo is just a mess usually with issues, so I just wanted to highlight that. I'll link the discussion. And yeah, I just wanted to say that. So oh, that's the pool. That's just the freaking pool. I didn't link that wrong. Okay, just wanted to say that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, all these things, there's no one perfect answer. Each answer has its own challenges, but these are all good points, and we need to consider them as we continue to move forward. Okay. And then Terry, I'm going to put you on the spot here. The Slack migration, that's just one thing that's been going on, but is there anything as we close out here on the Slack migration that we need to make people aware of? Are we basically to the promised land there, or are we still managing 2 Slack channels?
I think he's left the meeting.
Oh.
He had to leave early, but I haven't seen any additional activity on the Kubeflow old Slack, if that's what you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
Most people seem to be on the new one. I have seen a few people, but I usually just point them towards the new one. That's like very rare. That's what I mean. There could be a lot of messaging activity still taking place. I could take a look at the stats. But yeah.
Okay.
I guess the last question is, what's the final state? You know what I mean? We're obviously going to archive the last few channels, but like, yeah, maybe we set up a bot to just spam the chat constantly saying, please use the CNCF slide of the one remaining channel. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that probably needs to be finalized. And then what else? How well did we do on the migration?
It's hard to know, right? Like, what would success look like? There's no real obvious answer there. There are 407 people in the Kubeflow Dash announcements channel on the CNCF Slack. Obviously, there was nearly 12,000 people on the Kubeflow Slack. So we have definitely lost some ability to communicate with some users. And obviously, the CNCF Slack no longer has any non-Kubeflow things on it. Like the distributions had to go to their own places. So that's one thing that's changed. But I think it's fine. Like it's the thing that I think we need to think about as community is who's responsible to respond to these messages, or is no one responsible, right? Of course, by the way, when I say 11,000 to 400, the reason that is the case is because people joined the this Kubeflow Slack over the past 7 years, right? So, also in my experience, just at running big open source projects, like people only join Slacks when they need help, usually, or they're contributing, right? So once someone's solution has been found, they're not going to be looking for a new place to join, right? And so there's one other thing to add is that also the CNCF Slack, most people are already members, but you have to explicitly join this Kubeflow Slack. So we have got links on the Kubeflow website, but maybe if someone has an idea to make that easier, like automatically adding people to more Slack channels, I don't know, things like that. Like maybe there's a button we could press that says join me to all the Kubeflow Slack, you know, like something like that. I don't know if that.
Yeah, sorry, there is no way to raise my hand. I don't think Slack is good for answering questions because people tend to do the same question again and again, and Slack is super hard to find the answers. Maybe we should start, let's say, Stack Overflow or another way that the user can start doing the cache and use Slack for discussions, general discussions.
So Ricardo, okay.
So one of the things we did for Pipelines Working Group is to enable the discussions tab on GitHub, so people can raise questions there. People can open a thread to discuss about ideas or the questions they had for a given topic, and then there's the history of it. So, and then I think there's one thing we didn't do yet, but it's part of our plans, is to put in the README docs to say, if you have any questions, please take a look at the discussions tab first to see if your question is already answered. Otherwise, raise another thread on discussions. I don't know. Maybe it's something that could work with other working groups.
So I agree that I think we should do that. I think it's the best approach. I don't think we should use a third-party service. I think GitHub's probably the safest. But the thing that we didn't do it for last time is because there would be no one assigned to actually answer the questions. Like, and so it would build up, and it, you know, the discussion tab is only as useful as the responses that it gets, you know. And so obviously, it either the best case scenario is that the developers respond, but the worst case scenario is that random people start answering issues incorrectly, you know, and things like that. Also, a lot of questions that people ask, just based off the Kubeflow issues, are very not about Kubeflow. They're like, I'm doing a generative AI thing, you know, what should I do? And it's like, well, you know, that's not really, we can't answer that. What does that mean? But yeah, there are questions that are legitimate though. So I think it is worth doing, but we need to be very careful about saying who's responsible to respond, who's going to be reviewing the answers that are given, and things like that. Also, to be
But-
clear, GitHub discussions are per org. They are not per repo.
I don't know if it's possible to do by the in the org level, but
No,
if
they're
it's
only
possible,
by org, right? Aren't they? Or do they enable?
no, I just enable on the pipelines repo, so probably it's per repo.
This must have changed. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, anyways, so for your question about having people answering questions wrong, I guess we'll end up the same thing on Slack Overflow, whatever we open for questions so anyone can answer. I don't believe it's possible to control that, but yeah, I know it's a valid concern, but I don't have a meaningful answer for this right now. All we have is people are raising questions there, bringing ideas, maybe for feature requests, and I'm doing my best to reply all of these when I have time. And there are others there doing the same. So yeah.
So yeah, I definitely, I think because the most important thing in my mind is that we actually triage and have some, like there has to be at least a possibility of a response, right? Like like I know Slack is bad, but at least it's not perfect because it doesn't keep the information. But the number of like having it on the GitHub repo will cause many more requests. That's what I'm saying. That's just like, and that's not a problem. In fact, that's good for the project. I just wanted to say like if we enable it on Kubeflow, which obviously we probably would, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But anyways, I think one of the biggest things for having discussions tab enabled on the repo is that if the question of a given user turns out to be a bug, you can convert the whole thread, this whole discussion thread in a GitHub issue automatically, you know? So we have that sort of integration of the GitHub features to have people asking questions, and if there's a potential bug, you can just bring out that thread and open a new issue. So you don't lose history about the discussion.
You do need to have write access on the repo that the discussion is on, but yes.
To
Oh no,
enable
sorry,
the
you need.
special tab, you
Sorry, I take
need.
that back. Sorry, to convert them to an issue, you actually only need the maintain action. And actually, this is something that we should discuss a little bit, which is, it's not now, but like I've talked about it in past meetings, like that we currently only have 2 levels of permission. We have, well, really, we only have one, which is that everyone has no write access at all, and they use the bot to do everything, which is fine with approver files. Some people have write access who need to cut tags and approve GitHub action runs. But there is a third lower level than write called maintain that lets you edit headings of titles. Again, we can do that with the bot, so that's not necessary. But it lets you mark people as spam. You know, like there's clearly a lot of malicious stuff going on sometimes, and it's a problem. To lock conversations that are getting out of hand, you know, things like that. But it also lets you do the things like you just said, convert a discussion to an issue, convert an issue to a discussion. It doesn't let you transfer issues between repos. That requires actually write access on both repos. But we can use the bot again for that, probably. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that maybe if we have a new category of people in each working group that are like triages, I don't know, that could be part of their role if they get maintain access. Oh, not maintain. Moderate? I don't know what the name that GitHub gives it, but something like that. Anyway, I don't want to take any more time.
This is a very important conversation. I'm always concerned about
Yeah,
how many
actually,
places
yeah.
we try to answer questions in. I'm always thinking that the fewer amount of places to answer questions, the better, but whatever.
So Josh, actually, this is the one you just did highlight something in my mind, which is that I think that I would request of the steering committee. I don't want the steering committee going crazy, of course, but like I would love it if the steering committee did set out just very baseline expectations for the working groups, and not in a way that's like, you know, prescriptive, but like, you know, like and not like, you know, we'll remove you or destroy you if you don't do these things, but like, you know, and so we set out some expectations, and then we just that are reasonable, like, you know, that certain issues get done or whatever, that you have discussions, you respond to them, but then we don't say if you're not succeeding at it that you know you failed. You know, we say what's the health of each working group and review it, and then figure out how we can get the health back, because everyone is volunteers mostly, as you say, and then it's like, okay, so if the working group for pipelines is struggling to triage new issues, then what processes can we put in place? What companies can we request resources from? You know, yeah, yeah. Someone just commented that isn't that part of the strategy from CNCF? Yes, for the overall project, but it is the responsibility of especially of the bigger projects like Kubeflow, that are actually multiple projects, to you know, moderate themselves. You know, so the steering committee would have to report to the CNCF, yes, how successful and healthy everything is. But I think we should also set up regular, maybe quarterly check-ins for health. Like, so the way that the Apache Foundation does it is that the various leads of the groups, you know, send a report to the steering committee every quarter, and they say, like, you know, how healthy is it? What metric? And they have particular things they have to put in there, like metrics and things like that. And so it's something that we might consider.
Yeah, I like that. It's probably where we need to go for the graduation. We have a lot of working groups, so minimizing the overhead, I think, is going to be important. Maximizing the benefit of what those reports are for everybody involved. I mean, reports for report's sake, no, but reports that help everybody, I think, are good. So yeah, let's think about that. I think those are good suggestions.
Cool.
Okay, we're way over time. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week. And let's get 1.9 out the door. See y'all later.
Thank you. Bye.